Welcome to On Health with Houston Methodist. I'm Zach Moore. I'm a photographer and editor here, and I'm also a longtime podcaster.
I'm Katie McCallum, former researcher turned health writer, mostly writing for our blogs.
And Katie, if there's one thing that we've heard more than anything else on this podcast, it's the Mediterranean diet.
That's true.
It's been recommended to us all the time.
Yeah, pretty much anytime eating healthy gets mentioned, or just eating, not even healthy, just eating in a way that's not negative, the first thing that comes out of someone's mouth is, if you had to pick something, do the Mediterranean diet.
Mm-hmm. Which is appealing to me because I do like Mediterranean food, right?
Yeah.
But I've never really sat down and said, you know what, I'm going to do the Mediterranean diet. So in my head, I'm like, I don't know, it's like gyros. What is that, right?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Have you tried it?
I had not really heard of it too much before I started, writing about it more. And, we've obviously heard about it a lot on the podcast since. I've tried it. I wouldn't say like wholeheartedly. I think it's a bit tough to wrap your head around, especially like here in America. Mm-hmm. And because the way we talk about it here is it comes off as very like, it's almost like a vegetarian diet. I think my first thought was like, oh, it's like a vegetarian diet. No thanks. But I have since learned that it's very different than that. I have tried it. I eat close to a Mediterranean diet now, but this has been going on with me for like 4 years of hearing about it from all of our experts. And finally I'm like, all right, yeah, that might be for me. I don't stick that close to it though. It's tough.
It is tough. And with all these diets, right? It's like even the word diet makes it sound like,
Yeah. Well, I think it's exactly that. I think the first times I would hear about it, I'm like, I don't really need a diet. I eat pretty decently, or so I thought. But then when you hear the word diet, like you said, you're like, okay, weight loss, which really isn't even what the Mediterranean diet is about.
Right.
And then also when you hear the key principles of it, you kind of start to reevaluate like, maybe I don't eat as healthy as I thought I did.
Right.
So that was my experience at least. And so you have not tried it.
Not officially.
Okay. What is your diet? How would you describe your diet?
Well, I'm getting put on the spot here now.
Yeah.
I'm not currently practicing a specific diet. What I am trying to do right now, eliminating a lot of soft drinks, sugary things, drinking mostly water. That's kind of my like default right now. I mean, special occasions, obviously, you drink more than just water, but like that's my go-to. Like if you're going somewhere, you drink water or you drink tea or something like that. You don't go for the soft drink or fill in the blank, whatever unhealthy beverage you want to fill in the blank with there. Trying to tone down on those. And then also I was pescatarian for a time a few years ago. And that was like the healthiest I was when I was being pescatarian.
Yeah.
And it just, when you have some sort of kind of like guidelines in your head, it helps. Because if you're just kind of like, oh yeah, I'm going to go get a burger or whatever, that adds up. Then if you turn around and calculate how many burgers and fries you got over a month, it's like, oh wow, how many days are there in a month? 30?
Yeah.
And 20 of those days, maybe for lunch or dinner or some combination, you got something like that.
That does sound like a lot of burgers.
Right?
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Not part of the Mediterranean diet, is it?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We'll find out.
We will find out.
Yeah.
So who did we talk to about the Mediterranean diet, Katie?
We talked to Leah Obeid. She is a registered dietitian here at Houston Methodist, and she breaks down what the diet is, why we should maybe switch to it. And then we also really get into the part I love about our conversation is we really get into how to make it work for you in your life and like how to get started. I think that's the big hang up a lot of people have. All right. Well, I'm super excited to talk to you today. Like most dietitians, you probably talk about the Mediterranean diet. I'd say fairly frequently. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of figured. We have been hearing about it on our podcast frequently. Zach and I have been joking that we need to do an episode on the Mediterranean diet probably since season 1. We're in season 6 now because every couple of episodes, a doctor will say, hey, the best way to manage this condition you have is to eat a Mediterranean diet. But I'm excited to talk to you in particular because the Mediterranean diet is more than quote unquote a diet for you, right? The Mediterranean's home for you.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm from the Middle East, so I practically was born there and grew up there for like 21 years.
Okay.
So it's like part of my life.
Right. Yeah. So it's part of your life. So we're hearing it straight from, like it's actually your lifestyle.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. First question I want to ask you is, what is the Mediterranean diet in your own words? Because I know a lot of us hear the word diet and we immediately think like, oh gosh, add it to the list of another, way to lose weight. And, I'm not going to be allowed to eat certain foods or like, what is this? So when you're talking about the diet, how do you describe it?
So I more of like consider it as a lifestyle more than a diet, for several reasons here. So in the Mediterranean lifestyle or diet, there's no foods that are kind of to be avoided or eliminated, or like every food fits, which is this is one of the things that come to my mind when I think of the Mediterranean lifestyle or Mediterranean diet. So every food fits. And one big word also is moderation.
I was going to say, you had me at every food fits.
In moderation,
Gotcha.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so if we're talking about the different type of grains, protein, healthy fats, red meat, any kind of food components, everything fits, right? But it's how frequently you're having it in the week and how much you're having it in that specific serving, that specific meal or snack that makes the whole difference. So the Mediterranean diet per se is having a bit of everything. It's also a variety of different things. So mainly several different types of proteins, several different types of grains, various different fruits and vegetables. It's all that variety in and options, and just adding in different things in your day-to-day that makes it kind of different.
Gotcha. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but a key principle is these different things are probably not processed foods. They're whole foods.
Yes. So if we were to like highlight some key principles for the Mediterranean diet or Mediterranean lifestyle, we can go over like a list of different things here. And so starting off with the grains, right? So we're talking about, let's say, mixing between quinoa, wild rice, regular rice, oats for breakfast, for example. If we're talking about mainly proteins, we are mainly referring to the leaner sides of protein rather than the more processed ones. And also one huge thing when it comes to protein specifically is the plant-based proteins when it comes to the Mediterranean lifestyle. And so focusing more on all the different types of beans, whether it's the black beans, red kidney beans, black-eyed peas, chickpeas, lima bean, whatever kind of lean protein, that's a huge aspect of it. And so having those different beans several times a week, so 3 to 4 times a week, for example, and then keeping, let's say, grilled chicken breast, going for the whiter sides of meats rather than darker sides of meats. Again, that's another way where you would focus on the leaner sides of, and like less processed, if that makes sense also.
Yeah.
And then also going like specifically talking about the Mediterranean way of living, we definitely focus on fresh fruits and fresh vegetables. And we usually focus a lot also on seasonal fruits and seasonal vegetables. And sometimes we would only have fruits only because it's the season right now, and that's about it. So like, for example, there would be a few fruits where you wouldn't eat them if it's like maybe December or January. So that's kind of some key principles. Specifically also, like, for example, red meat. Again, it's not like avoiding it at all cost, right? Here, again, it's moderation. And so having it once or twice per week, as well as the healthy fats. That's another major thing that I wanted to also highlight as a key principle in the Mediterranean lifestyle. So healthy fats, this is also a huge thing. So our main 4, if you want to consider them go-tos when it comes to healthy fats, it's mainly nuts and seeds, avocados, and like olive oil as a major component here in the healthy fats. So again, more of the like non-processed and whole foods.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned meat, because I think a lot of people hear Mediterranean diet these days and they think plant-based, and then they think, oh, I can't have meat. So we're kind of dispelling that myth right away. So can have meat, just in smaller amounts maybe than other things, or less frequently?
Yes, definitely. So I like to think of it as a week by week thing. And so I like to think of it as, okay, so for this week, we have several meals, several snacks, right? And so thinking of our protein intake on each of those meals, at least having 3 or 4 out of all the different meals that we're going to have this week coming from plant-based, or like beans, lentils, and then 3 or 4 or maybe 2 to 3 coming from chicken or turkey. And then we can also do red meat here, so once or twice per week of red meat, and then you can also go for eggs once or twice, or maybe even more if you like love eggs. So definitely, again, like this is how you would like vary different food items in that week, and you would be having a bit of everything and in moderation. So
I like the week to week mentality. I think it kind of makes it less. Sometimes when I'm thinking about, I try to eat, a Mediterranean diet. It's a little hard, but I do like this week to week thought, because sometimes when I'm thinking about in the day, I get tripped up on certain meals, and then I'm like, oh man, I already ruined it. So I'm kind of just like, I'm off the train right away, and I kind of give up. So I like the week to week idea.
No, definitely. And also another thing is like each meal and each snack is a chance for you to incorporate something new, right? Like even though you didn't really have the lunch that you wanted, basically, it's okay. There's dinner coming up. So you can like then be a bit more mindful for your upcoming meal. Or if it's dinner, then the next day, it's okay.
One thing I've really gotten into are nuts. From Costco, you can buy like the unsalted, like premium mixed nuts in bulk, and I'm obsessed to the point where like it might not be in moderation anymore. That's like the hard part. Like I was joking that like I never would have thought, it took me so long to be like, oh yeah, nuts as a snack instead of like a bag of hot fries, whereas now I'm like, I actually do look forward to it, but then I'm like, ooh, I might eat too many now.
Definitely you can like snack on nuts so easily.
Oh yeah.
And honestly, there's such a wide variety of different things out there. You can have different nuts every single day. But again, like moderation is the thing. They are a very good source of omega-6 and omega-3. They do have also slightly higher protein content compared to other healthy fats. Like if you were to compare, for example, olive oil, let's say, so they are on the higher side of like protein.
Okay.
There are some nuts also that they do have, if I'm not mistaken, in like quarter of a cup, you do have like 10, 9, around 8 grams of protein sometimes. So that's like a decent amount.
Yeah.
But they do also go under the category of like calorie dense food. Yeah. So that's about
they're delicious. So that makes sense. One thing I wanted to ask you that I was thinking about as I was sitting here, when you moved here, did you find it was hard to eat a Mediterranean diet? And I guess I should say, did you find it hard to carry out your Mediterranean lifestyle here in the US?
To be very honest with you, yes, it was a bit harder for me, which I never thought that would be something I needed to focus a bit more on it. And like back home, I was a bit more carefree, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the huge things is like the portion sizes here. So like even though we went, let's say for dinner or for lunch, the portion that I would like have is maybe double what I was used to.
Okay.
So
double is a big number.
Or maybe 1.5 times to be more.
Also still large. Yeah.
So yeah, like this is one thing that I had to kind of adjust to. But other than that, of course, here in Houston, actually, there are a lot of Lebanese foods or Mediterranean restaurants where you can definitely find like authentic foods, which is something that I found very nice. If we ever needed to go out and like enjoy some nice maybe kebabs or something, you could definitely find like very close to home type of taste, which is also nice. Yeah.
Truly one of the biggest perks about Houston. We're sitting here in the middle of summer and it's already very hot. And I have to remind myself sometimes that at least, the cultural food options here are great. And I imagine it does help with stuff like this where we should probably be eating almost anything but American food, I would almost say. I think that's like where we go the most wrong. I had a burger and fries yesterday, for instance.
Me too. So it's fine.
Cool. All right. I was going to say, probably not, a principle of the Mediterranean diet, but, it was my like little treat for the day.
Yeah.
And it was delicious.
Definitely. That's also where like all foods fit. And like definitely once in a while, you can definitely enjoy a burger with some fries. That's also what's kind of nice.
Okay, cool. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is olive oil, because I think that's the one thing that when I first started talking to you and others about the Mediterranean diet, olive oil is the thing that I would hear like, hey, just swap butter for olive oil. And like, I was like, okay, well, it's not going to taste as good. But then I started doing it. And I mean, I don't even know if it tastes as good because you just don't notice it.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I was making some risotto a few weeks ago and the recipe calls for like some butter. And I was just like, why? And I didn't put it. It was still delicious because, risotto is delicious.
Yeah.
And, it's just funny how that stuff adds up. So is that how you think about olive oil too? I mean, I'm intrigued by it because it's so delicious as it is.
Yeah, no, definitely. So for olive oil, we usually enjoy it as like more of a raw, if that makes kind of sense. So we kind of use it either in a salad dressing or like when the dish is done, we like sprinkle it with like some olive oil. I'd like to go a bit more like technical on olive oil.
Yeah.
And if we were to break it down into simpler compounds, two major things that it would be kind of made up of would be, first of all, the fatty acid aspect of it, which specifically it's the monounsaturated fatty acids. I'm going into this much details just because I wanted to highlight that this type of unsaturated fat is the one that has been shown to benefit our heart health the most, slightly, if we want to think of it, slightly more than the polyunsaturated fatty acids. And so in most olive oils, the monounsaturated fatty acids makes up 70 to 80% of it.
Oh, wow.
And then like the second compound or the second part of that olive oil is actually its antioxidant profile, which is specifically vitamin E and polyphenols. And so like thinking of it as in a more general view, looking at it, it's like, all right, so it's made up of monounsaturated fatty acids and antioxidants, which antioxidants per se helps us fight inflammation and decrease inflammation in our body. So this is how it would be very beneficial. Now, even though olive oil has all those health benefits, it's essential to use it in moderation as well. So like all oils, it's still also just like it goes under the same category of nuts like we were saying earlier. So it still goes under the calorie dense food. And so I would definitely encourage to have like a minimum and a maximum type of thing.
Okay.
And a nice way to also think of it as a day-to-day thing or maybe weekly. Like if, let's say, one of your meals definitely had some olive oil, or if you had some hummus and added some olive oil on top, then maybe you will leave like the snacks of nuts for the next day. So because you already enjoyed like part of the healthy fats, and then keeping like something else, or maybe having just a small handful or like slightly less than the usual.
Leah mentioned the Mediterranean diet's impact on heart health. If you've listened to our other episodes, you already know that the benefits don't stop there. It's proven to lower the risk of developing several health conditions, including heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, cancer, and more. It can also improve blood sugar and cholesterol levels, and perhaps even cognition in older adults. These issues aren't trivial. They're some of the most common chronic health conditions affecting Americans today. Reason enough to take Leah's advice and tips for following a Mediterranean lifestyle to heart.
I think when anyone hears the word diet, the next thing they think about is weight loss. So when it comes to the Mediterranean diet, should people be expecting weight loss from it? Is that possible? I've heard some people say when they've switched to a Mediterranean diet, they've lost, 20, 30, 40 pounds. Is that common?
Mm-hmm. So I believe that a person could definitely achieve weight loss when they are on a Mediterranean lifestyle or Mediterranean diet. Actually, a very interesting study that I read previously was they had two different groups. The first group was on a Mediterranean diet and the second group was following a low-fat diet. And surprisingly, maybe, the group that was following the Mediterranean lifestyle or diet showed a greater reduction in weight loss compared to the low fat. And I just believe that it might be because of the like wholesome approach that the Mediterranean lifestyle has, because it not only focuses on like one specific thing, right? It's not specifically, for example, low in sodium, or it's not specifically low in added sugars. It's like it's taking everything all at once and like making it all into one lifestyle or one diet. The fiber content coming from all the different fresh veggies, from the fruit and from the whole grain, which creates more satiety in a person. So generally having a meal that is higher in fiber whether it's from the veggies or whether it's from a grain, or maybe adding a bit of fruit to it, like adding maybe some strawberries on your salad, for example. So that greater or like higher amount of fiber will help a person feel a bit more full after a meal. And so increasing satiety after a meal would be a good way to help achieve a weight loss goal. Another thing is like more so going for the unsaturated fats rather than the saturated fats. Another thing that I haven't mentioned yet is going for the low-fat products when it comes to dairy. So maybe going for the 2% milk or 1% because it's lower in the fat content. And so this is, again, like it's all those different things that are put together that would benefit a person on many different levels, whether it's the heart health, whether it's type 2 diabetes, whether it's weight loss.
Up after the break, Leah gives us tips on how to start a Mediterranean diet and make it work in your own life.
From annual checkups to managing chronic conditions, your healthcare should be personalized to you. At Houston Methodist, our primary care doctors provide customized care for you and your family, with more than 40 convenient locations across Greater Houston. We offer a variety of ways to get care, from in-person and virtual appointments to same-day visits when you're sick. Choose your doctor and schedule online at houstonmethodist.org/stayhealthy. Houston Methodist, leading medicine.
We've talked about why do it, what it is. I think probably some of the hardest part, and we've already alluded to this, when you moved here, you found it was harder to follow the Mediterranean lifestyle. I think it's also hard for like someone like me who's eaten the standard American diet for, I don't know, probably like 35 years of my life. And then kind of am brought to the realization that, hey, maybe I should try to switch the way I'm eating. I want to talk about how to do it. Like, how can someone actually take everything we've talked about so far and turn it into like an action plan, whether that's today, tomorrow, a couple months from now, after they're done with all their vacationing, and like actually start implementing these practices. A big thing that I wanted to talk to you about were plant proteins, and you've sort of already talked about them, but I think that's the biggest hang up that I had, and I've heard other people have had. People just don't think they can get enough protein if they're not eating meat. Like I think, or like if you're saying, hey, only eat red meat 1 to 2 times a week, everyone's like, oh, how am I going to get enough protein? So yeah, if we could talk, can you just talk to us a little bit more about why protein is so much more than just a steak, a burger, a piece of chicken?
Definitely. So if we were to like break it down into servings, right? So 1 serving of protein contains 7 grams, right? If we were to look specifically at our plant-based proteins in half a cup of lentils, we do have around 9 grams of protein. So this is even higher than a regular serving. And then most of the beans do contain more protein per serving. And so this is where, like, if we were to take 1 cup of lentils and then we had a grain that's more of a whole grain, so it would also contain slightly more protein than like a simple carbohydrate. And so let's say it has 3 or 4 grams of protein per that serving. So having maybe as low as 1 cup of cooked beans, that would be maybe roughly around 20 grams or 18 grams, let's say, and then adding 2 servings of that other grain that has, let's say, 3 grams. That's already adding to that 6 grams. So that's around 26 grams in 1 meal, which is, I believe, a decent amount of protein in 1 meal.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who care about getting protein, it seems like they're sometimes getting like too much. Like I know some people who weight lift and things like that, and they're like, I got to get my protein. And so at some point when they tell me like how much protein a day they're getting, I'm like, wow, that's so much more than I'm getting.
Definitely. I feel like I've heard this a lot also, like going a bit overboard on the protein just to make sure that they're having enough. Honestly, like, again, moderation is also a great thing that goes in here also, because having too much of protein wouldn't be beneficial to your body as it would be as just having what your body actually like needs, because all the excess protein will be excreted.
Yeah, gotcha. So you're wasting it anyways at that point.
Kinda, yeah.
So in your example, are you thinking like you could pair like lentils and quinoa or something, and that's like a bunch of protein for a meal? Or
So it's funny you mentioned this because we have a recipe or like a dish back home that's mainly, it's kind of rice and lentils. That's the dish. So if you were to add maybe like half a cup of white rice with half a cup of wild rice, and then 3/4 of a cup of lentils, and then mix this together. And we usually add a bit of olive oil when it's done, and some spices, and then also caramelize some onions on the side, and then like mix it all together, and with a side either of roasted veggies or a fresh salad. So basically, yeah, that could be definitely one way to incorporate like a grain and a bean together, or some hummus also.
yeah, absolutely. So what are some other kind of examples of what you just said, where I think one thing that I think I have kind of gotten tripped up is like how to put together meals when they're, when you don't have meat. I think here everything centers around like the meat on the dish. So like, do you have any other kind of like combinations that you'd recommend that people probably don't often think of that they could try? And they're still getting all their protein. They're still getting some, they're getting some vegetables. They're getting everything they need.
Yeah. So another thing that I can think of right now is tofu as being one of, maybe it's a bit controversial, or if some people hear tofu, they're like, I can't stand that.
Yeah.
But interesting way to cook tofu could be getting like the whole block of tofu, and then with a fork, if you ground it, just
I've never done that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you ground that tofu and then you put it on the stovetop and act as if it's meat. So add all the spices that you add to your regular dish. And the only thing that I would say that on the stovetop, it would just take slightly more time to cook because it's mainly made up of water. And so it just needs a bit more time to lose the water. But once it's done, you can definitely have this. And honestly, after adding all the different spices, it would look like ground turkey or ground beef. And I've tried it. That's why I'm saying this example. I've tried to do this with like a taco.
I was about to say, I'm thinking like, should I try some like crispy tofu tacos sort of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
And so this is like, and also I think in half a cup of tofu, if I'm not mistaken, again, there's like around 10 grams of protein.
Okay.
So that's also a very decent amount.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. It's interesting because I think it's like part of the struggle is figuring out how to like make meals when it's not centered around like, okay, I'm cooking chicken breast with, and then it's all the with that you kind of like never think about. Whereas it seems like now it's the opposite. You kind of maybe need to think about the whole grains, the vegetables, those things first. And then you're like, yeah, sure, maybe there's a little bit of chicken breast or something, but it's not like the center of the dish necessarily.
Yeah. And you were earlier also asking about some swaps or things to make this lifestyle a bit more, or like how to adopt this lifestyle. And so it could be from something you also referred to earlier, like switching between using butter to using olive oil, for example. That's one thing. Another thing would be mixing in your grains. Like if you feel like you're going to have slightly of a hard time to fully adjust, and it doesn't necessarily need to be like forgetting about the white rice or white bread or whatever that is, but at least like thinking of it in a day, like at least one out of the 3 meals, 1 or 2, or 1 meal and 1 snack, one of those grains coming from those meals would be a whole grain. So it could be on your breakfast, you chose to have whole grain toast, but then you can definitely have white rice for lunch, for example. So it's kind of incorporating it where it kind of fits, or for example, going for whole grain crackers. And this way, next time you have a snack, you would be having a whole grain cracker with maybe your hummus, for example. Another thing that you can also do is what also something you referred to earlier is like thinking of your fruits and nuts as a snack. And this is something huge. So I grew up my whole life like thinking like in my head, ooh, I really want a fruit right now. And it would be like kind of snack time.
Yeah. I have to say that's probably not the same for me. So
yeah. And I totally understand that, but you can turn it into something more fun, right? So like I usually sometimes get a banana, put some peanut butter on top, and like 1 small teaspoon of honey, drizzling it on top. It gives that sweetness that you sometimes crave or want in the middle of the day. Or maybe going for a banana and a date to have that more of a sweetness, or adding just some more fruits to a flavored Greek yogurt. So, and again, Greek yogurt also is a good source of protein. Some of them might contain 15 grams, some of them 18 grams in 3/4 of a cup. So even if you had like half a cup or maybe 1 cup, adding to it 1 cup of fruit and then maybe like a handful of nuts. And this way you would be having, some omega-3s, a good protein intake, as well as getting some antioxidants and fiber from the fruits. Another thing that I can also kind of think of is, for example, when it comes to alcohol, we haven't touched upon this yet.
Yeah.
So the red wine.
How did that end up coming up in the conversation?
Switching up between maybe one of your drinks or 1 day per week going for red wine, for example. Not that I would be encouraging to go for red wine, but again, in moderation, or like swapping.
When you're making swaps.
Yes, when you're making swaps. If you regularly or you usually don't go for that, you'd go for something else, maybe a bit more sugary or something, maybe going for 1 glass of that. And this way you would be swapping something to another.
It sounds so easy when I'm just sitting here talking to you, having you kind of build my week for me. It's almost like working with a dietitian on a meal plan. It is like a helpful thing to do.
That's what I do on a day-to-day, kind of.
Yeah, it's I can see why that's very beneficial for people, because I'm just sitting here like, wow, that sounds easier now that I'm talking to you. I'm glad you touched, I think you kind of touched on breakfast, or something you said hit my mind about breakfast, because I think that's another hard one for me. I know you mentioned yogurt with some fruit and some nuts. I think to me that kind of sounds like breakfast. In my mind, I was originally thinking, I love avocado toast. It's one of my favorite things to eat. And to me, that seems like a healthy breakfast that falls in the Mediterranean diet. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. I'll take it.
Definitely. Like if you're taking a piece of whole grain toast, adding half an avocado on top and adding either 1 or 2 eggs, that's a very like balanced meal where you have your healthy fats coming from avocados, whole grain coming from your toast, so more fiber, maybe slightly more protein to that. And then 1 or 2 eggs also as a protein content. Is like a balanced kind of Mediterranean.
Did you guys ever eat cereal growing up?
I grew up eating cereal.
Okay, so are there so cereal? How do you do cereal? And is it coming with an asterisk?
So no, but like for cereal, it's definitely something that I wouldn't recommend to have every single day.
Okay,
but you can definitely have it like once a week or once or twice a week.
Okay, so this is the moderation part.
Yes, exactly. And then also maybe being slightly more mindful on the nutrition fact label of that cereal that you have. It might be, some cereals might have some dried fruits in it, some might have some nuts in it. So, and then others are a bit more colorful or yummy, which I totally understand that, honestly. And I wouldn't say that you, again, like there's nothing to avoid or eliminate in that lifestyle. But again, it's how much you're having it in one sitting, and how much you're having it in a week, if that makes sense. Another way to also enjoy it is, let's say we were talking about plant-based beans and or plant-based protein. You can definitely also, if you have lactose intolerance or don't enjoy cow's milk, you can definitely have it with a base of plant-based milk. So another thing I would like to highlight here in plant-based milks is maybe going for the ones that are slightly higher in protein, because as protein per se helps with satiety and provides fullness. And so going for maybe soy milk, it has around 8 grams of protein in a cup. And so that's already like a decent amount if you were to compare this to almond milk or to oat milk, which the regular ones have quite minimal amounts of
almost
protein.
nothing. Right?
Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 grams. But I know that there are some brands that fortified their almond milk and oat milk with some protein. So you might be able to find maybe an almond milk with 8 grams, but you need to like kind of search for it.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, just like increasing slightly the protein content on your meal. And the only thing about cereal is like it's not super filling, which I totally understand also.
Yeah.
I just remembered I sometimes used to turn it into more of a bowl. And so when I grew up a bit more and I realized what I was eating, I just added a few fruits to it. So I used to add like half a banana with half an apple and then a handful of nuts on my breakfast. And this is something I used to actually have. So it's cereal. It is.
Yeah.
But like turning it into something a bit more like fulfilling and
some more real foods in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Gotcha. Okay. What about snack ideas too while we're here? I think you mentioned the banana with some peanut butter and drizzle with honey. Any other kind of like clever snack ideas?
Yeah, so for some snack ideas, something that might not be very popular is edamame. Like, honestly, I sometimes just steam a bag of edamame. And so steaming some edamame will provide you a good protein and carb. Another snack that I can think of, well, the Greek yogurt and the fruit and some nuts could either be as a breakfast or as a snack. A handful of nuts and dried fruits could be something that you would go for. And honestly, something I usually share is you can keep like a bag of your favorite nuts and some dried fruits in your office. And this way, whenever you feel like having a small snack, it's convenient, it's there, they're shelf stable, and you can definitely enjoy a handful and some like sugary things. Also, 2 dates and a tablespoon of peanut butter, some popcorn is a good idea as well. It's high in fiber.
I love popcorn. I buy the bags of the pre-popped popcorn. It is hard not to eat the whole thing, though, I will say. Back to the moderation part.
Yes.
There's like a particular brand that I'm thinking of where I'm like, man, you wouldn't think it would be so good because it's not even buttered or anything. It's just like the olive oil on it is what they say.
Yeah.
And it's like not too salty because I buy the reduced salt one. So good.
Have you tried doing popcorn on the stovetop?
I have not.
So this is something I also grew up with, which is basically we get a pot and a bit of oil in the base and then add the corn kernels, like just as
So
they
the
are.
old-fashioned way.
Yes, kind of. It was fun when we were kids because we used to hear them pop and it used to make us way more excited to have popcorn. And so you just cover the stove and then wait for a bit. A nice thing that my grandma used to say is like between each pop, if you can count till 3, then you would know that it would be ready and you wouldn't be burning the popcorn.
Okay, nice. Cool.
So yeah, that's something also that I grew up having sometimes as a snack. And you can pair it with maybe a cheese stick to have it, as a complete snack with some higher protein content, some complex carbohydrates coming from the popcorn. But yeah, a cheese stick and maybe on a toast with half an avocado as well, or maybe going for another type of cheese like feta cheese, for example, with half an avocado, some hummus and some bell peppers. If you're the type of person who likes crunchy things, it could definitely be maybe baby carrots or cucumbers or celery or bell peppers, and then dip them into some hummus or some guac.
I was going to ask, where does chips and guac fall? Is that like kind of healthy-ish?
I mean, yeah, like especially if you went for like a whole grain chips, that's or it's basically made up of maybe it has some seeds in it and it's whole grain chips. Definitely, why not?
Okay, nice. I like that. So those were all like great meal ideas and snack ideas. As we leave this conversation, I wanted to ask you, are there any parting tips you have for any of our listeners who are kind of inspired by this conversation today and they want to get started and they have no idea how to get started beyond what we've talked about today? Are there any other kind of tips you would leave someone who wants to try to start eating a Mediterranean diet? Any other tricks of the trade?
Yes, so definitely. So there are several ways where a person can start, and I like to break it down into like more of a food groups. So the first way is thinking of your grains. Let's say you already do whole grain, then that's great. Then moving on to the next thing, which could be protein. Are you choosing most of the times going for leaner sides of protein? Have you tried having some beans more often? Fish, that's another thing that I wanted to also highlight. Fish is definitely a thing that we would want to include in our week. Having 1 or 2 servings of fish. It could be canned tuna or canned sardines, or it could be salmon. It could even be some sushi once in a while, right? So thinking of your proteins next, and then thinking of your veggies. So vegetables. One thing I wanted to actually highlight when it comes to vegetables is there are 2 types of veggies. The non-starchy vegetables and the
bad news. The French fries do not count.
So yeah, for the vegetables, going for, let's say, at least having 1 or 2 cups on your lunch or 1 or 2 cups on your dinner, and baby steps, honestly, picking one out of those 3 meals in the day or 2 meals in the day, and then adding 1 more cup of veggies on that meal, or picking the leaner side of protein, or picking on that day a mix of grains, for example. But yeah, back to the veggies. So the non-starchy vegetables and the starchy vegetables. An easy way to remember them is that we can like kind of simplify the starchy vegetables into a shorter list, which is potatoes, yams, and all the different sweet potatoes, all the starchy potatoes that go under this category. And then we do have our corn, our peas, butternut squash, and acorn squash. And those kind of 4 starchy vegetables do go under the category of carbohydrates when you're kind of evaluating your meal. That's another thing I wanted to kind of touch upon is if you've heard of the My Plate. And so having half of your plate full of non-starchy vegetables, quarter of the plate full of carbohydrates, and the other quarter full of protein. This way, making sure that those veggie on that half of the plate is coming from the non-starchy vegetables, or the starchy vegetables would go under the carbohydrate category.
Right.
Doesn't mean we're not going to have some. It's just like rearranging them in our heads and then going for the non-starchy ones. And the list can go so long with the non-starchy vegetables: bell peppers, cucumber, tomatoes, mushrooms, onions, spinach, all the different types of lettuce, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, all those different things. Those are our non-starchy vegetables. And so this is also another way where we can like have or like go one step further towards the Mediterranean lifestyle, is adding those veggies. And if you feel like it doesn't really fit on your meal, it's not an issue. You can have it as a snack with some hummus, you know? If you feel like, well, I'm kind of full right now, didn't really have much, or like didn't really have that 2 cups of veggies on my meal, no problem. There's another snack coming up soon that you can definitely enjoy some veggies on there. And like starting to think of fruits as a snack with me, I think this is on a harder level.
Yeah.
I totally understand that, but also like turning it into something a bit more fun again, like we were discussing earlier. Another fruit group that I was thinking of is dairy products. And so going for the white cheeses a bit more than the yellow cheeses. So mozzarella, maybe a burrata from time to time, some feta cheese. So those white cheeses also. And healthy fats, focusing on the unsaturated fatty acids more than the saturated fatty acids. So I feel like a person can pick where they feel more comfortable, that they would like to start, whether it's the fruits, whether it's the vegetables, whether it's adding slightly more fish in their diet, whether it's focusing a bit more on the plant-based proteins. If this is too far, then going like literally just one step at a time and starting just with one thing. I wouldn't recommend to start with like 7 different things.
Right. Just go full speed and say, I'm overhauling my diet completely tomorrow.
Definitely.
Hold my breath and just do it.
Yeah, because it's habits that you've had for 30, 35 years that you're slowly going to change. And it needs some time to get used to the new ways of thinking, the taste of the food. But you will get used to it, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've started eating berries for dessert. And at first I was like, oh man, this is going to take forever to get used to. But now like I look forward to like I do raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, like I kind of mix it up and like it's good. I do think of it as dessert now. I mean, I was laughing earlier because I think it is a hard concept to introduce your mind to when we're used to like chocolate cake or something. But no, it is, your taste buds get used to it. You're just kind of like, and then your mind gets used to it too. Of like,
I totally agree with that. Yeah. And keeping those sweets and baked goods for occasions. This is how it's also back home. Like it's maybe for on birthdays, on special events, when you're celebrating something. Maybe you just feel like having it. Also just keeping a mental note in your head. Okay, so how much did I have this week? Or how much of my snacks this week were mainly baked goods or those things, so that you can like be like, okay, maybe I'll try something else this time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today. This was great. I already kind of try to keep the Mediterranean diet going in my life. I feel way more empowered now. So, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Of course, it's my pleasure. And thank you for having me.
Well, first of all, I think we should now call it the Mediterranean lifestyle, Katie.
Yes, very true. Which we like better because we did not like the term diet in the beginning.
Right, we were talking about diet. Now it's a life.
Yeah.
It's just, there's
Lifestyle.
a mental shift when you say a lifestyle than a diet. Because a diet, even there's that negative connotation sort of, even though like there shouldn't be, but there is. And then it feels temporary, right? Oh, I'm going to go on this diet for a while.
That's a really good point, actually. Right? Yeah. Diets don't seem sustainable, whereas the Mediterranean lifestyle, very sustainable. So I appreciate that she framed it that way, I think I needed that. We talked about it at the top. I've been trying to eat a Mediterranean diet and I get stuck because I'm like, oh, I can't think about what meal to make now because I'm trying all of my meals to get them to fit in some sort of box. Where her point of like, no, it's just a lifestyle and think of it week to week and think of it as nutrient to nutrient. It kind of opened it up to me to be a little more flexible and give me more freedom. I truly think that was probably the piece I was missing the most. And also it was great having her just literally tell me what to make for meals.
I mean, no joke. If someone handed me a sheet of like, eat this at this time, and like I would be more successful at these attempts I have at these well, let's say diets, but lifestyle changes because it's like,
but you can't keep up with that.
Like,
what, you're going to look at a sheet every day for the rest of your life about what to eat?
I don't know.
You're not going to do that.
See, but that's when it becomes unsustainable.
Exactly.
Like we're talking about, there's 1,700 rules you got to follow.
These are just the principles instead of, plant proteins. Like I think that was a big thing too that I'm glad we talked about is protein is more than just a steak, a burger, the 20 burgers a month. Like there's other ways to get protein. And in fact, when she talked about the dish of rice and lentils mixed together with the caramelized onions and a side salad, I think a lot of us would think of that meal and think, okay, these are sides. Where's the protein? It's like, it's right there. It's in front of you.
I think we've all gone to Mediterranean restaurants and you get this plate and it does feel like, oh, well, there's a whole lot of carrots here and rice here. And then, the meat,
tiny kebab.
the tiny kebab or the lamb meat or whatever it is, right? It's like on the same small little portion of the plate everything else is, and it helps kind of equalize all that for you. It just changes your mindset about it. Because I gravitated toward that part as well when you guys were talking about the rice is like the main thing, and then like, oh, we'll add a little bit of chicken on the side, and you switch that up, and it really changes your whole perception of the meal.
Yeah, and I think also we forget that there's protein in things like quinoa and beans and stuff.
She mentioned tofu. I don't.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
I've ever had tofu.
So I'm glad that she mentioned it because I am not a big tofu fan. I'll eat it, but I don't like seek it out necessarily. And I'm not like, ooh, I'm craving some tofu. But doing the tofu, the ground tofu as like a taco sounded very intriguing. I have not done it yet, but I'm going to do it.
I've heard, is my understanding, I haven't tried this, I might, but it's all about the seasoning.
Yeah,
right?
Well, it's like when you make ground beef tacos at home.
Which I do a lot.
Yeah, you use those packets and like you could barely taste the meat anyways at that point. Like we use ground turkey now. So like, I could take it another level and do ground tofu. I'm sure all you're going to taste still is just that like chili seasoning and stuff like that.
And it's going to add up over time, right? It's not going to be like, and that's the other thing to think about, right? Like when we call it Mediterranean lifestyle, it's not a Mediterranean diet. So you're not like, how many pounds did I lose on the Mediterranean diet? That's not the end goal, really. It's just the overall health and a lot of things you can't see.
Yeah. Well, and just actually eating like a normal person should kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like we don't eat enough vegetables. We eat too much food. I think it's all these things where our diet has kind of shifted so much to where like, a steak is the center of the meal and now you're just trying to fill your plate around it. Whereas like what I kind of heard her say is like, okay, think of these like veggies as sort of think of these whole fruits and whole foods and whole vegetables first, and then figure out, okay, I need to get some protein. Let me do some beans and some rice or something like that, which I think it's just a different way of thinking. I think it's hard for people to make that switch, but I so much will come out of it.
All right. Well, we'll give you an update in a future podcast about how the Mediterranean lifestyle is going for us.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like maybe a trip to the Mediterranean should fit in the Mediterranean lifestyle.
I agree. We'll get work to pay for that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of On Health with Houston Methodist. We drop episodes Tuesday mornings, so be sure to share, like, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And until then, stay tuned and stay healthy.